Hey everybody, it's Dave and Olive. Thanks for joining us here at Book Blather, where we talk a lot of horror, science fiction, fantasy, but we mix it up with a lot of other fiction and nonfiction as well. Today we're here to do our, as usual, late May wrap-up. Before we get started, if you're new here or you haven't yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button along with the notification bell. Okay, so in the month of May, we read a really nice variety of books. The first one we read was The Bell Chime by Mona Kabbani. This is a debut independently published novella that was published in September of 2020. I haven't heard booktubers talking about this book. The reason I discovered it was Mona has a very active Instagram account where she talks, she reviews books, and she's a writer herself, and so she talks a lot of horror on there. Somehow I got following that channel, and I discovered that she had written this book, her own book. She's actually written two now, I believe. And it sounded interesting, so I figured I'd pick it up. We were very pleasantly surprised. This book is basically what this book is about. I can't say too much about it because it's a short book and, we'll give it away. Basically, the way it starts is that this woman finds a missing persons poster in her apartment complex of herself. And it's a very different caricature of herself. It's sort of a demonic looking version of this woman. And so that's how it starts. She's trying to figure out, what this is about. Now, this story kind of immediately took me to a place that I was not expecting. I recently read another book by Stephen Graham Jones called Night of the Mannequins, and one of the things I had a lot of fun with that. One of the reasons was because it immediately took me somewhere where was not what I was expecting at all, and that's kind of what Mona did with this book. It was one of the numerous really good things about this book was that she kind of took you to numerous different places. That is not at all what I thought this thing was going to be about. Pretty quickly, as the title implies, you hear this bell chime that lets you know that something is not quite as it seems, and you kind of go on this exploration of her trying to figure out what it is, and it's sort of an exploration of this woman's psyche where you're along for the ride, where she and you are trying to figure out what's real and what's not. Did you hear that? So that's really all I could say about it without spoiling. But there was a number of really good things about this book. The writing was really good. There was a few mistakes in it, but it's independent. I think that's probably going to happen for any independently published novel where you don't have an editor. But the writing as a whole was very good. She made very good use of literary devices, and there was other. She created some really powerful imagery in different parts of the book. Mona did a really good job of exploring this woman's psyche, and really at the end of the day, this is really sort of a psychological horror, and it was a really cool story. So my only issue with the book was that the structure, as I was going through it, felt a little disjointed to me. There's a number of jumps in the story. You kind of start here and you kind of jump back and forward and partially back and partially forward, and one will specifically get called out as an outtake, but others not really. And so Mona speaks to you at sometimes during this book, and in the beginning there was this sort of prologue that at first I wasn't sure if it was some kind of metafiction, and then there's an afterward where Mona kind of explains a little bit, which is it's a little bit unusual, and it may just be a stylistic thing for me, but I found it a little bit disjointed as I went through. And it didn't, like I said, there was a lot of good things about this book, so it's not like you're confused about what happened, and so it didn't really take away from the value of the book, I don't think. It's just, I mention it because I think it probably would have helped knowing that going in. I think I would have liked that, knowing that going in, and it maybe would have seemed a little less hiccupy to me as I was going through it. But there it is again. You're not hearing that? Weird. So yeah, it was a good book, and you know, surprising because as I said, she's a debut. This was a debut independently published book, and I feel a little funny saying that because I want to, I don't want to say, well, for a debut independently published novel, this was good because this book was good. Period. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just saying it was all the more surprising because it was, her debut independently published novel. So it was surprising that it was that good. Like I said, not perfect, but it was pretty good. She has another novel out that's a bit longer called Vanilla, and I'm probably going to be picking that one up at some point. Now, I have to say, Olive got a little too excited about this book. As we were reading it, she really was a little obsessed with the theme and kind of got a little too in the mode. Okay, so the next book we read in May is Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. I hope I didn't completely butcher that pronunciation. It's published in 2021 by Europa Editions. I'm not sure about this, but I think this book was this was translated from Japanese. I think this was originally published like 10 years ago and is just being translated now. I don't know, I hadn't heard anything about this book, and I discovered this just as recently browsing in our new Barnes & Noble, and it was, one of the new releases. I picked it up, I read the jacket, it sounded interesting, and so I read, as I often do, I read the first few pages while I was in the bookstore to see if it hooked me, and it did, so I brought it home. Very different style of book than we're usually talking about. This one is about a boy in school that is absolutely not just bullied by his classmates, but absolutely tortured. And he has this nemesis that's like the head bullier, who has a whole following of kids that surround him. And the level of bullying is really severe, and it's really torturous, and it's just something that for a long time that he has just put up with and lived with. It's just a part of his daily existence. And so our main character makes another friend in his class, a girl that is also the subject of severe bullying, but through more of a lifestyle choice that she has selected for personal reasons. And so he becomes friends with her, and they communicate not publicly, but they develop a real dependence and affection for each other. And another essential character in the book is sort of the head bullier's right-hand man. And that, our main character ends up having some interaction with, both good and, both instructive and bad. And it's really these two. It's the main conflict, right, is between the main character and the head bullier, but it's really their two friends. This girl that our main character meets and the sort of right-hand man of the main bullier. And these two sort of set up this removed existential dialogue in the book about really the meaning of suffering through this of enduring this sort of suffering and pain, and whether it has any meaning or not. So that's really the main philosophical subject that's being explored against the backdrop of this very, very graphic, harrowing story. And it is difficult to read at times because the bullying and the torture is so severe among these kids. But it was a very compelling read. It was really good. I don't know that I would give this a 5 stars, but it's a solid 4. It was like I said, it wasn't the most pleasant read, but it was a worthy one. I'm pretty glad I read it. Okay, the next book we read in the month of May is We Who Are About To by Joanna Russ. This is a science fiction novel. It was published by Dell in the mid-70s. I'm not sure. I think parts of it appeared in magazine form originally, and so I don't know. It was published in 75 or 1977, something like that. Joanna Russ has a very highly acclaimed novel called The Female Man, which I also have and I'm going to be reading at some later time. But I read this one first because this one was mentioned by a fellow booktuber, Juan, over at Plagued by Visions. He had mentioned it a couple times, including during his one of his most disturbing books videos and one of his video on feminism in science fiction, which is one of the best booktube videos I've ever seen. I'll link it below. You should definitely go watch that one. So I had kind of mixed feelings about this book. Basically what this book is about is it's about a crew of a few women and a few men, that there's some like extra dimensional accident and flings their spaceship to this far off planet that's barren with no other planets or stars nearby, and so it looks like that's pretty much their destiny is on this planet with no hope of rescue, and so they have to figure out what they're going to do. And as a group, they decide that they need to populate the planet, and so that they can survive as a race in this new world. And so everybody agrees to it, and the men and the women are going to copulate and try to start bearing children, except for our main character, who is completely against this plan and refuses to go along with it. A little bit of her attitude is, I don't know if I would call her maybe a little bit of a nihilist, but really just she sort of has a defeated attitude about their what their fate is. She kind of says, let's be realistic, we're going to die, and that's it. And she kind of tries all different sorts of things to try to resist the group's plan. The rest of the group is pretty forceful about it, and she tries different strategies, acting as though she's crazy, as though she has drug problems. She tries running away, and all these different things. And so I think there are a couple of interesting philosophical pieces to this novel. The first is, which I'll leave most. I'm going to link Plagued by Visions video below, where he really delved sort of into the issue of sexism and patriarchal attitudes that were accompanied this crew, even as they go to a completely new world and what's maybe a new dimension, or I'm not sure, but follows these sort of social constructs that follow them to this new world, and why they bring this baggage with them. Juan does a pretty good job of explaining that, so I'll just link his video below and leave that to him. That was definitely present in this book, but I think also another part of this book was sort of our main character's exploration of how to go about dying, basically, because in her view, that's really what their fate is. There's really not much for them to do other than to get busy dying, and so I think a lot of it is kind of an exploration of that. So the book was good because of those different themes that were explored. What I didn't like about the book is that there was a lot of out loud thinking that our main character did, and a lot of references to things that I frankly just didn't get, and I found a lot of it somewhat confusing. There was things that she was going through this and she was deteriorating. There were times it was difficult to tell whether she was spaced out on drugs, or whether she was delusional from starvation, or whether she was talking about events in her past, and definitely all of these things were happening, but it got a little confusing to follow what was what, especially because I personally was having a lot of trouble understanding what a lot of the references were and what she was talking about sometimes. And that I think I'm normally pretty good about that, but that may have just been, you know, my lack of sophistication with this. And I don't know if some of the stuff is dated as well. So I did find a fair bit of the book somewhat confusing, the second half of it, really. This one had its good and its bad. It is probably worth reading, even though I would probably give this book a 3. But I think probably different people would give this book vastly different ratings. So I think this is the type of book that's, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I would not recommend it. I think it's probably going to mean different things to different people, and different people will get different value out of it, I think. Okay, and the last book that we read in the month of May, not literally the last book, but another one that we read in the month of May was Extraterrestrial, The First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth by Loeb. Now, we did a separate review on this, so I won't go into it too much, but this book was basically this nonfiction by Loeb, who was a professor, a longtime chair of the astronomy department at Harvard, well-established scientist that has tons of writings and working on a number of very exciting things. And this is this book is part science, part philosophy, about really being open to the idea of the existence of alien civilizations. And he does this in the context of talking about the Oumuamua object, which came into our solar system in late 2017, which a lot of people think may have been a very strange comet or asteroid, but Dr. Loeb is convinced was not, and he lays out kind of the reasons why he thinks that the most likely explanation for it is that it's a piece of alien technology based on all of its unusual properties, and why, as a philosophical matter, that this is a theory that we should be very open to, and we should expect this sort of thing. So, as I say, there's much more in-depth review of this book, which I will link in the cards and link below. I really enjoyed this book. I would definitely recommend it, and I would recommend going and watching that other video that we did on it. Okay, that's everything we read in the month of May. Thanks so much for watching. As usual, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so that you get notified the next time Olive says it's okay for us to upload another video. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.